Hey guys, today we are going to be talking about the 2012 disappearance of 5-year-old April Jones, which led to a huge coverage in the national and international press and actually became known as the largest missing person search in UK history. 1 year later, in 2013, in May, Mark Bridger was found guilty of April's abduction and murder. He was actually sentenced to life in prison with a whole life tariff, meaning that he is unlikely to ever be released. Okay, so now that we know what we are talking about, let's just start from the beginning. And I need to give you a disclaimer, guys. I will be butchering a lot of the names around here because this case takes place in Wales and there are some Welsh names which I did try my best to pronounce right. I was listening to the correct pronunciations, but sometimes it happens that I just can't pronounce them right. April Sue Lynn Jones was born in Machynlleth, Powys in Wales on 4th of April 2007. She disappeared on 1st of October 2012 after she got into a car which was really close to her home. April, she was actually born 7 weeks premature and she suffered with cerebral palsy from the hip down. But this didn't actually stop April from being a playful, active, and energetic baby girl. She loved her pink bike and she rode it from a really young age. And of course, her favorite color was pink. She also adored animals and the outdoors, but most importantly, she loved her mommy Coral, her daddy Paul, and her siblings. Coral and Paul later said that April, she will be remembered for her love for mommy, daddy, siblings, and how she liked to be bossy, and she had a wee cheeky nature despite being loving and kind. They also said that they will think of her every time they see the color pink and rainbows in the sky. April's mom, Coral, said that April was just her little Thumbelina, just like a little diamond. April's favorite toy was a small wind-up hamster, which her mom said would just drive everybody crazy in the house, but it was just so much fun. Her sister Jasmine later said that after April went missing, at one point someone told them to try and get some rest, but they just couldn't do it. She remembered that going up to her bed and staying in a room which was hers and April's with an empty bed was just soul destroying for her. Now, before we carry on with the rest of the story, let's just get to the word in Romanian really quick, which is Țara Galilor. Țara Galilor. Țara Galilor. Well done, guys, you just said Wales. Now, according to various sources, Mark Bridger, the man who was found guilty later on of April's abduction, who was 46 years old at the time, he is actually the uncle of April's two half-sisters, and we'll get into more details about Mark later on. So, you might be wondering, what exactly happened? Okay. On the evening of 1st of October 2012, April, she went to swimming lessons at a local leisure center whilst her parents, they attended a parents' evening at her school. After finishing her swimming lessons, April asked a friend from school, a 7-year-old, to come to her house so that they could watch together the film Tangled. So the friend agreed. They watched together Tangled. After they finished watching, April begged her parents to let her play outside with her friend. Now, it was quite late outside by this point after the Tangled film finished, so April's parents, they were kind of reluctant at first, but they eventually gave in. However, her mom, Coral, told April that yes, she can go outside, but she can't stay outside for too long. April Jones was last seen by her parents riding her small pink bicycle at approximately 7 p.m. At 7:15 p.m., April was out playing with her friends at the Brynigog housing estate in Machynlleth. 20 minutes after Coral allowed April to play outside, with April still not back home at the house, her mom decided to go out and look for her. So, at 7:29 p.m., with no luck in finding April, Coral, she decided that it was time to call 999 to report April missing. Police was sent out and the first officer on the scene managed to speak with the witness, who was a child. Now, this child said that she saw April getting into a grey van. On hearing this, the police immediately upgraded their investigation to a critical incident and they launched a massive search across Machynlleth. Tons of members of the public, some who found out about April's disappearance from social networks, joined in the search for her, with the number going into the hundreds by the early morning hours of 2nd of October. Mark Bridger, the 46-year-old local man that I mentioned at the beginning of this, was arrested on the afternoon of October the 2nd, 2012, which was less than 24 hours after April went missing. Now, Mark, he actually became a suspect in the case because he was the one who matched the description of the man and the car, which was a left-hand drive Land Rover Discovery. This is the car that the witness saw April get into after she had a conversation with the driver. This car was actually quite memorable because it was a left-hand drive, so you don't really see these kind of cars here in the UK, or at least you didn't see back then. On 5th of October 2012, police officially said that April's case was now a murder inquiry. Even though a body was not found, this was the first indication that the police now had reason to believe that April Jones was sadly deceased. However, at this point, April's family was still unaware of the status of the investigation, as in that this was now a murder case. Now, as can be expected, the media was just all over this story. Sky News presenter Kay Burley was interviewing some of the volunteers who were searching for April live on air when she said that this case was now a murder investigation. Now remember that this was live on air. The volunteers being interviewed were not aware that it turned from a missing person case to a murder investigation. And remember that as well, April's parents, they didn't know that either. So it was just a bombshell for everyone live on air. Needless to say, the presenter Kay, she was accused of insensitivity after she broke the news live on air. On 3rd of October 2012, April's mom, Coral, she made an appeal for information about her daughter. The next day, Prime Minister David Cameron also issued an appeal to the public saying, quote, "Clearly, having this happen to you and the fact that she suffers from cerebral palsy, something I know a little about from my own children, only makes this worse. My appeal would be to everyone. If you know anything, if you saw anything, heard anything, have any ideas, you can bring forward, talk to the police," end quote. In the days after April's disappearance, a large search operation for April was mounted around the area, involving police, search and rescue teams who used specialized equipment, but also hundreds of volunteers. On 12th of December, around 3 months later, with no body found, police said that the search for April would continue into 2013. But sadly, on 27th of March 2013, police said that they would have to call off the search after they were unable to locate April's body. By this point, the search was no longer a rescue operation, but it was more of a recovery operation. On 22nd of April, police would confirm that the search for April officially ended. The police stated that a reactive team of specialist officers are available to respond to any new information that is received. And this would be the largest missing person search in UK police history. So now let's see who this Mark disgusting character is. Mark Leonard Bridger was born at the War Memorial Hospital in Coshelton, Surrey on 6th of November 1965. He was the second of three children born to policeman Graham Bridger and his wife Pamela. He has an older sister and also a younger brother. Mark grew up in a semi-detached house in Wallington, Surrey. He attended John Ruskin High School in Croydon, leaving with 7 CSEs or Certificates of Secondary Education. Mark didn't exactly have a clean criminal record. He had some convictions for minor offenses, which went back to the mid-1980s. When he was 19 years old, he was convicted of firearm offenses and also theft. He moved to Wales in the 1980s, and in Wales he was convicted of criminal damage, affray, and driving without insurance in 1991. Then in 1992 he was convicted again for driving without insurance. In 2004 he was convicted of battery and threatening behavior. Then in 2007 he received his 5th conviction, and this time it was for assault. So it's like, every few years he would be convicted of something. I'm not sure how long he ended up spending in prison for the convictions, but it's safe to say that he had quite a few convictions. And I would say, my personal opinion, that the most striking ones would have to be the battery, threatening behavior, assault, and firearm offenses. So he did seem to be a violent person, right? In terms of work, Mark didn't really seem able to keep a job for very long. He was an abattoir worker, which will be very important later on. Then he was also a hotel porter, a fireman, a lifeguard, a mechanic, and a welder. Now, I don't know how he was able to become a fireman and a lifeguard, but I don't think I would personally rely on him in saving anyone. Just saying, me, myself, and I here alone. So Mark, he got married at one point to the mother of 2 of his children from 1990 until they got divorced a few years later. Mark, he ended up having 6 children by 4 different women. Detective Superintendent Andy John, the senior investigating officer in April's disappearance, believed that April was probably sexually assaulted by Mark either at a remote location or at his cottage known as Mount Pleasant. John's theory, the detective, is that April went into the cottage alive and then she was killed there, maybe smothered, before Mark dismembered her and scattered her body parts. Mark's skill as an abattoir worker familiar with knives and his skills as an outdoorsman with an extensive knowledge of the mountains and valleys around Machynlleth meant that he was more than capable to hide most of April's remains very skillfully. According to Andy John, April's body was dismembered and different parts of her body were placed in different areas. Maybe those remains would have been small and damaged, and that's why police was struggling to find them. I mean, you need to think about this. April was only 5 years old, so her body would have been small as it is, considering her age. There were also fast-flowing rivers nearby, and at the time of April's disappearance, the river was very high, and police just couldn't rule out the possibility that some of April's remains went into the river or they could have been burnt on a fire. Police also found out that Mark had driven 400 miles since his Land Rover was serviced, which was 2 weeks before April's abduction. The detective said that it was possible Mark traveled significant distances to dispose of various body parts. However, based on the research that they did, it all pointed towards Mark going to areas that he was comfortable with. Which we all know by this point, if we are following true crime cases, that this is the case with most killers. They would commit the crime in areas that they are familiar with or comfortable in. Detective John also believed that the abduction of a child was premeditated, and the reason why a child was mentioned rather than April specifically is because the detective didn't believe that April was the specific target, but rather a child. According to images found on Mark's laptop, including pictures of sadistic child sexual abuse, did suggest that Mark was building up to the crime. The computer evidence pointed to an individual who was manipulative, evil, and who actually premeditated the abduction. Because of the evidence found on Mark's laptop, it was a clear indication that he was going to commit something as horrific as he did. So, after seeing this evidence, it didn't really come as a surprise. Although Mark had a string of convictions, which we went through for violence and deception, going back to when he was a teenager, Mark never actually had convictions for sexual offenses against children or for having indecent images. But in my humble opinion, this does not mean that he didn't look at indecent images or that he didn't commit these offenses, but rather he was not caught, no one reported him, and no one checked his laptop. I mean, this is just, my view. I think that when you are a PDF, you don't just all of a sudden start being one, you kind of build up to it, if it makes sense. But Detective John believes that at the time of April's disappearance, Mark felt that his life was just spinning out of control, so he kind of just, boom, exploded. He was losing control, and Mark is someone who likes to be in control. On the day of April's disappearance, he just lost it. Mark's relationship with his long-term partner broke down, he had financial problems, and he was also worried that he was going to lose his home. And the detective believed that April Jones sadly just happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. Of course, that this does not excuse in any way, shape, or form what Mark did to poor April, just an innocent girl who was playing outside with her friends. No one actually deserves this. It became clear during the police investigation that Mark was just on edge. 47-year-old by that point, with 6 children, with 4 women, he just broke up with his partner, Vicky Fenner. And on the morning of April's abduction, Mark and Vicky were messaging each other. Vicky's message was, "You were my love, I just can't do it." To which Mark replied, "You are my life, babe, you are everything." Then Mark, he took the day off work, and by midday he was on his computer already asking women out on dates, which is a huge jump from "you are my life, babe, you are my everything" to "do you fancy meeting up? No strings attached. Sorry I hurt you. Messages to another woman." Then at 12:11 p.m. Mark looked at a cartoon image from his collection of pictures showing young girls being sexually abused. This particular image showed a girl bound with gaffer tape forced to have intercourse with an adult. When Mark's car was recovered later, they actually found a roll of gaffer tape on his dashboard. So it kind of seems like he was trying to reproduce something. Mark also viewed images from Facebook of a friend's teenage daughter, and he actually saved 20 of these images. Police later found that Mark also had images of local teenage girls, including April's half-sisters, and 8 pictures of April herself. And just before 5 p.m., Mark Bridger drove his Land Rover 3 miles from his home, Mount Pleasant, in the village of Scenes, to Machynlleth to attend a parents' evening for one of his children. He took his computer and the dongle with him, and he continued to go on the internet that afternoon. However, it's not known what he was looking at because the device was not found. Now, I'm not sure which device exactly wasn't found because clearly police, they had his laptop, so I would have to assume it would be dongle which was not found. I don't know if this was just like a USB stick with stuff stored on it, or maybe It was like an internet dongle which you use to basically have internet on your device when there is no Wi-Fi available or whatever. I don't even know if Mark's parents' evening was at the same school as April's parents, because remember that on the same day of April's disappearance, she was at swimming lessons whilst her parents attended the parents' evening. So it kind of sounds like a big coincidence for both April's parents and Mark attending a parents' evening in the same day. Now, I don't know, and I didn't actually look into this, which I probably should have, but for some reason I didn't. So I can't be sure, but if this is indeed the case, that they were both at the same school, then I think it's just a horrific, horrific coincidence. Because even if it might not have been the same parents' evening, but rather the same school, then, this is just even worse. Just imagine April's parents when they found out that Mark abducted and murdered their daughter, and just to remember that they were attending, or their children were attending the same school. So, after Mark left school, the parents' evening, he began prowling Brinigog. He wound the window down and he invited one of his daughter's 10-year-old friends to have a sleepover at his home. Witnesses who saw him reported that he was just being really odd. One woman saw him driving up and down the same road. It seems as if he was just, looking for someone just randomly. Another witness saw him walking near the garages dressed in camouflage trousers. He walked past her without even acknowledging her, which she felt was quite strange because Mark was usually really polite. And it just seemed like on this day, Mark was in a world of his own. By around 7 p.m., he was sitting in his car parked near the garages, and at 7:20 p.m., he was heading out of town with April in his Land Rover. The next confirmed sighting of the Land Rover is 1 hour and 20 minutes later at around 8:30 p.m. when a neighbor saw Mark's car reversing onto the drive of Mount Pleasant, his house. Detective John said that it was very much possible that after Mark left McIntyre, he drove April to a remote location and sexually assaulted her there. However, there is no forensic evidence of an attack taking place in his Land Rover. But it was also equally possible that he drove straight back to Mount Pleasant and assaulted April in his cottage before killing her, dismembering her body, then driving away with her remains soon after. It's possible that the 8:30 p.m. sighting was actually of Mark returning home after he disposed of April's body parts. Police believe that Mark then spent the rest of the night trying to get rid of all the traces of April from Mount Pleasant and sterilizing the knives and other tools that he used, including the boning knife, which was found with a burnt blade. It's quite possible that Mark was really confident he's not going to get caught. He had no idea that he had been spotted by April's 7-year-old best friend. Remember the friend who was actually the child witness who said that she saw April get into a car? Back at Brinigog Estate, the hunt for April and her abductor was underway. The only police officer who was actually on duty in the town, Fiona Evans, she reached the estate at 7:37 p.m. and immediately she spoke to April's 7-year-old friend, who gave a very impressive account of what happened. She said that April got into what she believed to be a gray van. She also told the officer that the brother and sister of another friend may have been in the same car just the previous day. She told the officer who this friend was, and this was recorded in the storm report, which is the police's running record of the investigation. So this was recorded at 8:27 p.m. This information would actually prove to be vital in the investigation. The brother and the sister mentioned were two of Mark's children, but because of Mark's complicated family life, it took some hours for the police to actually make this connection. The police investigation in the early stages was sort of hampered by the fact that there were just so many people out there looking for April. People who could have revealed that the young witness was indeed talking about Mark's children, but these witnesses, they were actually not in their homes when police knocked on their doors. I mean, kind of everybody was most likely out there searching for April. So the police, they deemed April's disappearance as a critical incident. This actually instigated the UK's first nationwide child rescue alert, also known as CRA. And this was a move which was actually inspired from the US, in which high-profile appeals are designed to warn the whole country of a child's disappearance. So I think that this is about the Amber Alerts. So the Amber Alerts in the US kind of inspired the alert here in the UK. Now, you best believe that the police, they were trying to move quickly with this. Most victims of abductions are dead within a matter of hours. And with April having a mild form of cerebral palsy, she needed medication, so it was imperative that April was found quickly. By 9 a.m. on Tuesday, the 2nd of October, police had Mark's name and named him as a person of interest. So officers, they started working on his addresses and any vehicles he could be connected with. At around the same time, Mark was actually spotted near his home, close to a riverbank, carrying a black beanbag. A witness believed that there was something in this bag. Later, Mark took his Land Rover into a garage to be repaired, and then he pretended to help look for April. So kind of like inserting himself into the investigation. Where is my sponge? Oh yeah. So yeah, he was trying to get involved in the investigation, to insert himself in the investigation. And again, we know that killers, they really do like to insert themselves into investigations so they can kind of figure out or find out the progress of the investigation, right? Now, according to the detective on April's case, Mark didn't exactly seem like someone who was panicking or someone who was extremely concerned about what he just did the night before. He was more than likely hoping that, okay, it's done, and he just got away with it. But by the afternoon, he was officially a suspect, and at 3:03 p.m., police who were searching for him and April finally kicked in the door of Mount Pleasant, his cottage. But they couldn't find neither Mark nor April. But something in that cottage struck the police as really strange. The cottage had this wood burner which was giving just too much heat for an empty place, right? But they could also smell detergent and air freshener. Eventually, Mark was arrested near the river at 3:32 p.m., so around half an hour after the police stormed into his cottage. Mark would tell the arresting officer the same basic story that he would stand by during 13 police interviews and later his 3 days in the witness box. Mark said that he accidentally crushed April in a car accident and he just forgot what he did with April's body. The main issue for the police was actually, you might guess, conducting this murder investigation without an actual body. This is the hardest thing to do in a murder investigation. It's actually very hard to prove without an actual body that a murder even happened, right? But little by little, the horrors of Mount Pleasant would come to light. April's blood was found in the bathroom and the hall, but most importantly on the underside of the carpet, which was in front of the wood burner in the living room. Mark, actually, he did quite a good job at cleaning the crime scene, but he couldn't get rid of the blood which soaked through the carpet, or maybe he didn't even realize. During police interviews, he would maintain that April wasn't in his house, in his cottage, but later confronted in court by the overwhelming forensic evidence. You won't believe this, you won't believe this, oh my god. He actually told the jury that images of laying April down in front of the fire just miraculously came to him in his dreams. Believe this, oh my god. Now, I he actually told the jury that images of in their right mind April down in front of the fire just miraculously came to him in his dreams. Also, most importantly and crucial in this case were the 17 pieces of bone which were found in the ash of the wood burner and one piece in the bath plug hole. Scientists, they couldn't extract DNA from these bones, but some suggested that they could have come from a child's skull. Police don't believe that April's whole body was burned, but they do believe that the fragments of bone got into the fire and in the bath during the cleanup of the crime scene. While scientists, they were working on samples from Mount Pleasant, computer experts looked deep into Mark's laptop, and what they found would haunt April's family forever. As well as adult images of hardcore pornography, there was a library of graphic images, some depicting very young girls suffering sadistic sexual abuse by adults. He had also filed away images showing the corpses of children, and he collected pictures of girls killed in notorious murder cases, including the Soham victims Holly Wells and Jessica Chapman. He also searched social networking sites for innocent images of girls from McIntyre. Among them were April Jones and her 3 teenage half-sisters, which Mark carefully filed away. Forensic analysis of Mark's clothing revealed even more horrific details. Scientists were not able to eliminate the possibility that April contributed DNA to a sample taken from the inside of the crotch area of Mark's tracksuit bottoms. Even more crucial were his remarks following his arrest that if April's DNA was found on his penis, it could have gotten there if he had a wee while he was carrying her. Oh God, he was already, expecting that April's DNA is going to be found in that area, so he, came up with the story. He was already prepared, I guess. Oh God, some people are just disgusting. Worse than animals. At least animals, they are innocent, and they usually do what they do for their own survival. But I have to say that some people are just beyond disgusting, and it's just horrific to think that someone as similar as you and me, they can end up doing this kind of things. It's beyond comprehension, really. The 7 months since April was murdered were just really difficult, not only for her family and friends, but also for the whole town of McIntyre. Police and social services, they ended up visiting the estate since April vanished to take care of the children who were deeply affected by what happened to her, but they were also trying to find out if there were any other children who may have been victims of Mark in the past. But the detective in charge of the investigation said that no further allegations came to light. The search for April carried on through the winter, and it became the biggest search in British history. There was more equipment brought in, including drones, and the number of search areas within a box of 60 square kilometers reached 650. So 650 areas were searched. The police even brought in search dogs to search mine shafts and cave systems. A week before the start of Mark Bridger's trial, the police actually announced that the search was finally over, with a team of searchers on standby just in case they receive any fresh information. On 6th of October 2012, Mark Bridger was charged with abduction, murder, and attempting to pervert the course of justice. He appeared before magistrates on October the 8th, where he was additionally charged with the unlawful concealment and disposal of a body. He was remanded into custody and he was held at HMP Manchester pending an appearance at Carnarvon Crown Court, which was on 10th of October via video link. On 14th of January 2013 at Mold Crown Court, Mark Bridger pleaded not guilty to the charge of murdering April Jones, but he accepted that he was probably responsible for her death. The trial was set to begin on 25th of February at Mold Crown Court, but it was adjourned until the 29th of April at the request of Mark's defense team so that they could make further inquiries. So finally, the trial of Mark Bridger began on 29th of April 2013 before Mr. Justice Griffith Williams. A scientific expert testified and told the court that fragments of human bone consistent with a younger individual were found in the fireplace of Mark's cottage. Blood found in several parts of the cottage was matched to April's DNA, and this was enough to convince the police that April Jones had suffered injuries from which she could not have survived, and also to persuade the Crown Prosecution Service to charge Mark Bridger with murder. In his defense, Mark Bridger claimed that he accidentally ran over April in his car and he couldn't remember disposing of her body because he was under the influence of alcohol and in a state of panic. On 29th of May, the judge concluded his summing up and directed the jury to retire to consider its verdicts. Sorry guys, my nose is not gonna look great because I have really dry skin on my nose and it keeps spilling off and I have no idea why it does that. On 30th of May 2013, Mark Bridger was found guilty of abduction, murder, and perverting the course of justice. Later in the day, he was sentenced to life imprisonment with a whole life order, having been called a pathological and glib liar and a pedophile by the judge. After the verdict came in, it was later revealed that Mark had actually confessed to the Strangeways prison chaplain that he disposed of April's body in the fast-flowing Avon Dulas River, which flows past Mark's house before terminating in the River Defy near Machynlleth. David Powell's police doubt Mark's claims and they do believe that he scattered April's remains across the countryside near his house. In July 2013, several weeks into his sentence, Mark Bridger was attacked in Wakefield Prison by an unnamed prisoner with an improvised weapon, which resulted in facial and throat injuries for which Mark received sutures. Yeah, that will happen to you in prison when you mess up with a child. In December 2013, he started an appeal against his conviction, against his whole life tariff, but he ended up dropping this appeal a month later, just a couple of days before it was actually due to be heard. Although April's body was never found, 17 fragments of bone were recovered from the fireplace in Mark's cottage. The only remains recovered are spots of April's blood found at his cottage and tiny bone fragments discovered in his log burner that the police and April's family believe are pieces of April's skull. The lack of a body means that April's family will probably never know the full story of what happened to the little girl in the minutes or hours before she died. The funeral service for April Jones was held in Machynlleth on 26th of September 2013. In November 2013, following campaigning by April's parents, which was also backed by several national newspapers, the search engines Google and Bing changed their systems to block results from searches aimed at producing child abuse images. On 4th of August 2014, it was announced that the cottage where April is believed to have been killed was bought by the Welsh government for £149,000, having stood empty since Mark's arrest almost 2 years earlier. The cottage was then demolished in November 2014. April's family watched the house being demolished. April's father, Paul, said, quote, "Having this house demolished is symbolic. It's a sort of closure, the end of a chapter. All the times it has been there, it has been here, its existence plays in the back of your mind. Even when you are not thinking about it, it's there in the back of your mind." April's mother, Coral, added, "Even driving on the main road near the village is difficult. You go past and your head ultimately turns to that house. It brings back the horrible memories of what happened. It was a dreadful thing that happened here. It will not be a final closure." This is from mascara. I'm just gonna leave it there. Kind of like a beauty mark because I'm just gonna smudge it and, it's just gonna ruin the whole makeup. Okay. As for April's case, there was a documentary called The Disappearance of April Jones, and in this documentary, April's mother Coral and her sister Jasmine speak about their grief and their pain. Coral said that she just went into a deep depression which impacted her whole family. She just didn't want to see anybody and she didn't want anyone in the house. April's siblings didn't really have Coral as their mom anymore, and Coral feels quite guilty for that. And after a while, Jasmine, April's sister, she went and stayed at a friend's house. Jasmine said that at that point there was no home anymore. There was only a broken family, a house of memories and items with a broken family in it. 10 years after April's murder, the relationship between Coral and Jasmine has improved, with Jasmine saying that it's much better than it was at the time. Soon after April's disappearance, at the request of April's parents, Coral and Paul, the town of Machynlleth was adorned with pink ribbons, which was April's favorite color, in tribute to her. Special vigils were held and the town gathered outside April's home, releasing lanterns as a mark of respect. Over the years, April's family campaigned for April's law for tougher measures against sex offenders. In February 2018, the family revealed that April's dad, Paul, tragically developed a rare brain illness, and this illness actually left him unable to remember April's murder, which I guess it kind of would be a comfort to Paul, possibly easing his pain. I mean, I don't want to talk for him. This is just, my assumption. If I would be in his position, which thank God I'm not, and hopefully I'll never be, but I would much rather prefer to not remember than live with the pain, if you know what I mean. But this is just me. Paul's wife, Coral, told the Mirror that Paul just couldn't understand why April didn't visit him in the hospital. Meanwhile, a former police officer admitted that he was left broken after working on the April Jones murder case. Gary Hayes is now urging officers to speak out about their mental health after he founded the non-profit organization PTSD 999. Gary, who is no longer a police officer, he worked on the disappearance of April Jones. A father of 3 himself said, quote, "I've never seen a team so broken. Around 8 of us working on that case were parents and it impacted us all. We had a 6-hour drive back home and no one spoke in the van for the entire time. It was bizarre. The job can be emotional and draining. You go from job to job with very little downtime, trying to normalize the things you see." End of quote. In 2016, April's parents launched another petition calling for all sex offenders to remain on the register for life, no matter the crime. Previously, a petition was launched for April's Law, which called on the Prime Minister to stamp out child pornography online. However, April's family launched a new petition after they couldn't find out who began the original April's Law petition. April's mom, Coral, thanked everyone who signed and shared the petition regarding April's law, saying that the support was overwhelming, but unfortunately they couldn't locate the person who originally published the petition. So, the new petition is calling on the Prime Minister to make all sex offenders remain on the register for life, no matter the crime, for service providers and search engines to be better policed regarding child abuse images, and for harder sentences on those caught with indecent images of children. Coral was hoping that people will back the petition as they try to get it to 100,000 signatures to have it talked about in the House of Commons. Carol said, quote, "We have also spoken to many experts and have realized that our original ones regarding the policing of the web may not be obtainable." She added, "Over the last few years, Paul, Jazz, Harley, and I have worked tirelessly to raise money for missing persons and April's Trust." End quote. So I actually looked at this petition to kind of, see the results of it. And the petition got 127,296 signatures, which meant that the government responded to this in November 2016. Part of the response included, and I will be reading only the important bits. I mean, you can find it in full on the Parliament website if you want to read it. So, part of it reads, "The public should rest assured that sex offenders will not automatically come off the register. On 30th of July 2012, the Sexual Offences Act 2003 was amended by the Sexual Offences Act 2003 Remedial Order 2012 to introduce a mechanism which will enable registered sex offenders who are subject to notification requirements for life to apply for those requirements to be reviewed. This was as a result of an earlier Supreme Court ruling that our then law on indefinite sex offender registration without the right for review was incompatible with Article 8 of the European Convention on Human Rights. The government fully acknowledged the ruling and took appropriate action, as it is its duty, to uphold the independence of the judiciary by complying with the judgment. Under the previous government, we made changes introducing additional measures, making it mandatory for all registered sex offenders to notify to the police all foreign travel weekly where they are registered as having no fixed abode, where they are living in a household with a child under the age of 18, and their bank account and credit card details and information about their passports or other identity documents. Side note, before I carry on, it's just I find it weird that child sex offenders are allowed, after they are released from prison, to live with someone under 18 years old. I just find this completely shocking. Like, seriously, if you are a child sex offender, you've been to prison for sexual abuse, sexual assault against a child, and yet after you are released from prison, you are allowed to go home to a child under 18 who could potentially be your next victim. Make it make sense, because it just doesn't make sense. Okay, so let's move on to the next few bits. The government agrees that industry has a responsibility to work together with law enforcement. In 2015, Google announced that it had made changes to its search algorithm to prevent images and videos containing child abuse material from appearing in search results. They have publicly stated there has been an 8-fold reduction in child sexual abuse image-related search queries since. The Internet Watch Foundation has been active in facilitating the removal of indecent imagery of children from the internet. Their efforts helped the UK see a reduction from the UK hosting 18% of web pages of child abuse imagery to 0.2% by 2015. At the We Protect Summit in December 2014, industry committed to taking digital hashes of known child abuse imageries in order to ensure this could be identified and referred to the US National Center for Missing and Exploited Children and removed. As of October 2016, over 34,750 image hashes have been shared among industry by the Internet Watch Foundation. Sentencing is entirely a matter for our independent courts. When deciding what sentence to impose, the courts take into account the circumstances of the offense and any mitigating and aggravating factors in line with the sentencing guidelines. Maximum penalties are kept under review to ensure that the courts have adequate powers to deal with offenses effectively and proportionately. In December 2013, the Sentencing Council issued a revised guideline on sentencing for sexual offences, which came into force in England and Wales in April 2014. Under the Protection of Children Act 1978 as amended, the UK prohibits the taking, making, circulation and possession with a view to distribution of any indecent photograph or pseudo-photograph of a child under 16. Such offences carry a maximum sentence of 10 years imprisonment. Section 160 of the Criminal Justice Act 1988 also makes the simple possession of indecent photographs or pseudo-photographs of children an offence. This carries a maximum sentence of 5 years imprisonment. This age was raised to 18 in the Sexual Offences Act 2003, and there are defenses for those aged over the age of consent, 16 years old, who produce sexual photographs for their own use within a marriage or civil partnership. These defenses are lost, however, if such images are distributed. The Sexual Offences 2003 Act significantly modernized and strengthened the laws on sexual offences in England and Wales to provide extra protection to children from sexual abuse and sexual exploitation. It was designed to meet 21st century challenges of protecting children and addresses issues including internet pornography and grooming children for sexual abuse. End of quote. The petition was debated in Parliament on 13th of March 2017 and it was closed on the same date. So my assumption is that they didn't exactly approve of the requests that the family made in the April's law petition, and they kind of highlighted whatever else they have been working on and they have changed, and also the legal basis around why some of the changes cannot be made, and informing the public on the changes that were made. I got it off. It was just dangling there. I don't know, I'm such an idiot sometimes. And guys, this is the horrific story of 5-year-old April Jones, and sadly to this day her remains had not been found apart from those bone fragments which were found. And it's such a shame, really, and I really feel so sorry for the family, because in this way they might never be able to get full closure. I mean, there was a funeral, there were funeral services held, but still they don't have April's body, which is just heartbreaking. And I really hope that the family somehow are able to deal with this, with the heartbreak and with the trauma after everything that happened. And also, thanks to April Jones, the UK kind of took inspiration from the Amber Alert in the US, and they started using this system as well. And also there were a lot of changes made in legislation in terms of Google searches, and also harsher sentences for those who possess child indecent images and sex offenders. So, it's kind of bittersweet. Of course, it's going to be very, very bitter, because a child, a baby, a 5-year-old baby lost her life for the government to kind of think about some changes that they could possibly make, because otherwise, if it wouldn't have been for April Jones, they probably wouldn't have changed much of anything, really. And it's a shame, but it's also infuriating that something really atrocious or something really horrific has to happen before somebody takes any kind of action. And with this, I got to the end of today's video. Thank you so much, guys, for staying with me. Please do let me know what do you think about this case in the comment section down below. For now, take care, stay safe, and I'll see you next time. Bye!